Hi and welcome to this month's how-to video on all things art journaling and drawing, and thank you very much for subscribing. So this month we're going to carry on using watercolour pencils and I'm going to demonstrate how I use them drawing some really beautiful, natural, colourful, autumnal, seasonal finds. So let's get going. Okay, so here I am ready and set up to do this watercolour pencil drawing, and I've got a few gorgeous autumn finds on the table here because earlier this week I ran an art journaling for wellbeing workshop and it was kind of nature and autumn theme inspired, so I went collecting and I just thought, oh god, all these lovely autumnal colours are really beautiful. So I will use some of these, a couple of these anyway, for this drawing. But I just wanted to show you some of the things that I collected before we begin. So that's a Lord and Ladies, isn't it? I think, beautiful. I think I would like to try and draw that. I'm not sure what this is, but it's really beautiful. And if you look on the other side, it goes really pale. This is an apple from an orchard of the woman who I was doing the workshop for. And so I am going to draw the apple, and this is a gorgeous horse chestnut leaf that is obviously very much in the throes of turning and obviously fallen off the tree. What I've also got is my watercolour pencils, and I've decided for this drawing that I'm just going to use my Derwent watercolour pencils and my W.H. Smith ones. So I'm not going to use the Art Bar or the water-soluble wax crayons that I used in last month's video because I want to try and achieve a bit more detail than I think those tools will allow me. So I'm just going to stick with those two sets of watercolour pencils, and I've got my little set of paintbrushes with me. These are watercolour paintbrushes, but really I've only really been using this sort of thicker one and this thinner one. I haven't been using the sort of chisel end so much. So that's going to be my tools for the drawing. And so, as I said, I'm going to draw the apple. I'm going to add the colour to the apple using the watercolour pencils. I've drawn it once already. In fact, it's not that apple that I've drawn, it's that one. I just put that one there as one that another one that was collected, but it's this one that's got nice colouring, got green and red on it. So we'll do that in a minute, and then I'm also going to be doing this leaf, which you'll see on both instances I've drawn the shape out first, just because I wanted to give myself a little bit of guidance. Okay. So I'm going to start with the leaf, and what I'm going to do is select some colours that I think I can see in the leaf. So we've got some yellows and some very pale kind of ochre beige, slightly darker browns, warm brown, oranges, reds, maybe a bit of green. And I've also got here a blue, a green and another pale green. So the way that I'm going to go about this drawing is that I'm going to, first of all, work with a dry pencil on dry paper. And let me just let you know that with this paper, what I've done is I've bought a new pad, and this pad is what's called hot pressed watercolour paper. I'm not sure if it says it up here. I can't see that it says it, but it is hot pressed rather than cold pressed. And I don't know what the sort of process is that's different necessarily, although obviously the hot and the cold mix is part of the process. But what I found with the hot pressed watercolour paper is that it seems to be able to take water better and also take sort of numerous layers of water as well. So putting water down, letting it dry, doing another layer, letting it dry, etc. So I if you wanted to, you could try out a watercolor drawing with both cold pressed and hot pressed watercolor paper, see what you think, but I'm preferring the cold pressed. So there's my leaf again, and what I'm going to do to begin with is just put down like a first layer of colour, and I'm going to look for the colours that I can see in this leaf and start to add them to this paper, just in a sort of block. What I'm not going to do is too much anyway, is kind of like now immediately put another colour on top of that. I'm going to try and have one layer of colour over the leaf, but that one layer of colour will be made up of different layers, and there will be areas that overlap. There'll be a little bit of blending going on, but the more blending will happen when I add the water. So I'm just looking for where obvious colours, areas of colour are, and I'm putting that down as a first layer quite kind of quickly, quite kind of rough and ready. And I'm going to move between the colours that I can see. So I am kind of colouring in quite quickly, but I'm making sure that my strokes kind of follow the direction of the leaf. So up here, for example, I'm not kind of scrubbing across like that. I'm trying to make sure that my strokes, my pencil strokes, follow the shape of the leaf and the surface of the leaf. Just quite a lot of brown, pale, very pale brown here. I've also got quite a nice kind of chiseled end on my pencil, because what I don't want is at this stage is harsh lines, because when I put the water on, I think those harsh lines will still show up. So what I'm trying to ultimately get on this first layer is just a nice wash of colour when we've added the water to it. I don't want to have harsh lines showing up. Can probably afford to go a little bit darker, a little bit thicker. I'm not looking at the details. Well, I guess I'm noticing all the detail that I can see on the leaf as I'm doing this, but I'm not really adding it to my drawing yet. So I'm seeing where all the different blotches of colour, all the different veins coming in and out. I'm noticing where they are, which is good, but I'm not adding them in yet. A little bit of layering up here, just because I feel some of this needs to go a bit more orangey, a bit too yellow. And then like darker areas. Well, I don't want too many layers. So normally when I use colour pencils and they're not watercolour, you know, I have loads and loads of layers of pencil. So I'm just trying to tell myself to keep it a light touch at this stage because we're going to put more layers on top. Okay, so I'm going to stop there with my first layer of colour, and I'm going to use my slightly chunkier watercolour paintbrush and just start to dab that on across the leaf. So I'm dabbing rather than kind of stroking like that because I don't want my colours to sort of over blend and just become a mush at this stage. I want to try and retain some vibrancy of colour for this first layer. Don't worry too much about going, you know, right into all of these jaggedy edges. I might go over those with water, I might not go right to the edge. Either way it's fine because there's going to be more layers. And then dab up here. I'm keeping it quite watery. That's nice and bright there. Okay. If you find that you have put too much water on, you get a tissue, you can dab out as well, and then you'll get some, that's quite a lot of paint's come out there, and you can just remove it a little bit. But I'm just going to go over that again in wet. Okay, and then I'm going to get my smaller brush and go down the stem in the same way. So it's quite loose. Okay, then let's let that dry, and whilst that's drying I'm going to add my colour to the apple. So I'm going to work between these two simultaneously. Whilst one dries, I will work on the other. I'll put that on that side so you might be able to see a little bit of it. Okay, so actually I'm afraid I can't because I need to put my hand up here. So let's begin with some actually a bit of yellow I think first, because it's quite a bright, it's quite a light green, this apple. So just like I did the leaf, I'm going to put down just a first sort of layer of, I guess you might call it ground colour. I've got a little bit of light bouncing off this apple, so I'm going to try and keep that area blank if I can. Just leave areas of highlight if I can, maintain that all the way through. I want to try and avoid those dark big marks. Just going to be a first light coating. And what happens with the watercolour is that I think it dries a bit lighter anyway. Oh, I've missed out the highlight areas. I'll see if I can do that with the lifting out instead. Slightly more red up here. Oh, I've missed out the highlight areas. I'll see if I can do that with the lifting out instead. They're about here. I might be able to rub them out a little bit first. Not really. Yes and no. Again, I'm trying to make these strokes of colour come in the direction of the surface of the apple. So even though I went across there like that, I'm going to go over that now and bring them in, because I can see I'm trying to follow that curve in there. So I'm trying to make my marks come in the direction of the surface of the apple. So my personal aim for these drawings is to try, I want to achieve some detail, some level of detail, and have them look 3D and believable, but I want to try and not overwork them, because like I say, I tend to do that when I use my colour pencils. I go really sort of intense with them and have very strong colour. So I want to just try and keep this a little bit lighter touch if I can. Let's put some colour on that now then. You'll see that I've missed out the stalk. Actually, I will put a little bit of brown up the stalk. Just that, I've just got to be a bit more careful with that. But let's put it in. And also let's put a little bit of like grey coming down here for where it dips in and goes into shadow. And also here. Okay. I'll get my big brush. Have a nice amount of water on it. And I'll start on the green. Oh, that's nice. Dab. I'm not going to worry too much if I go over the edge. I'm going to clean off that brush a bit. And get more water at the same time. Just blend in that from that red to that green a bit if I can. Yeah, so I'm keeping it nice, adding on lots of big dabs of water, because I don't want to have, and this is just a personal thing, I don't want to have brush strokes at this stage. Can you actually see that? Apologise if that has been a bit difficult to see at the top. Coming down the grey. Let's use the thinner paintbrush for that. Okay, and then I might have left it a bit too late, but whether I can dab out any areas of highlight. I can always go back in afterwards. So what I'm going to do now is let both of those dry, and then we will come back for another layer. Okay, so I've let both of my drawings dry. The apple is still a little bit wet, but the leaf is dry. So I'm going to carry on with this now. And I've got my original right here. So what I'm going to do now is work on top of this first layer of a watercolour pencil. And I'm going to go a little bit more slowly and a bit more carefully and put another layer of colour on. So this is all quite pale, isn't it? And you can see that the colour on the leaf is much stronger. And even though I still want to keep my drawing looking kind of light, I do want a little bit more depth of colour. So I'm going to start to do that by working into my paper again. Feels a little bit squishy because I think, I mean, it is dry to touch, but perhaps it's not kind of dry all the way through. And also at this stage, what I can do now is I can start to include things like the veins of the leaf, perhaps some of the main veins anyway. And I'm going to do that by leaving a little gap so that this first layer of colour shows through just where the veins are. So I'm going to be looking carefully all the time. And again, it's going to end up being a kind of wash of colour again. But I think the colour might be a little bit more intense, a little bit darker, a little bit stronger. Keep a little bit of variation in there. We just don't want solid colour, solid coverage. I'm looking at my leaf all the time to see where the areas of colour are and where they go, where they're darker and lighter. That's made a bit of a difference already, I think. So that's my second layer of colour, although I did go over some areas with kind of another area. So some of them have got kind of 2 or 3, I guess, layers of colour here and there. And you can see that I have started to sort of try and show some of these veins and things and areas of shadow. So what I want to do now is add water again, but I don't want the water to, I want to be careful with adding the water because I don't want it to kind of obliterate any of this sort of subtleness that I've started to put in. But I do want it to sort of look a bit more blended. So I think I'm going to use my fine, smaller paintbrush for this. Still a decent amount of water. And again, I'm just going to dab rather than stroke, and I might not put water everywhere this time, just areas where I want to intensify the colour a bit, because you see there I just went a bit too far with that water and it's made it look a bit, made that area look a bit too flat. I wanted a little bit more variety, a little bit more subtleness. I think using watercolour pencils does allow you to get this nice sort of subtle washy feel and finish to a drawing that you wouldn't otherwise get if you were just using colour pencils and no water. But I still want it to feel light. I don't want it to feel overworked. So I'm not putting water everywhere this time. And I'm going to go over it again. Once this is dry, I shall go over it again with another layer of pencil here and there, emphasising some of these blotches and details that are giving it this kind of feeling of, well, telling us very clearly that it's autumn. So I'm not sure I'm going to do the entire leaf because it would take me a long time and you would be watching for hours. And I don't think my laptop's got the capacity to cope with that bigger file. So I might just concentrate on this bottom end, but we'll look at the apple in a minute as well. It's just a case of building up slowly and going until you have reached a sort of level of finish that you want. You might want to keep it even lighter than I am. Just pulling out some of those edges of the leaf there with my fine pen. Let's put a few more of those in. Just pulling them out from the pigment that I've already got on the paper. So if I was to go in now with a pencil, because we know putting a dry pencil on the wet paper is going to make that pencil come out really dark. So I'm not going to do that yet. Stretch that colour up a bit. So here's the apple. I'm looking at it more at that sort of angle, I think. But you can see that the colour, the red and the green and the colours in this apple are far stronger than what I've got on the page. So I'm going to try and strengthen up the colour on the apple, but again, without overdoing it. I'll just get rid of that bit of water because otherwise I'll be resting my hand in it. So I'm going to go in with a deeper red. So it's pretty much dry. And again, now this is going to be the second layer. So I might try and start to suggest some of the markings on the apple this time. See how they come. I mean, that looks better already, doesn't it? I could just do another layer with the pencil and not add water, but I will add water. But you can decide, you know, when you're doing this, how far you want to go with your layers of colour. So I'm going to put a bit more green down. Not all over it though. Well, not this. I mean, whoops, go back in with a lighter green again. This was the one. Yellowy green. And inside this apple here is quite dark now. I'm using the side of the pencil rather than the tip to put in a area of shadow there without getting kind of strong lines in, and I might just continue that around here a little bit as well. Okay, so let's see how we go with this. I think I'm going to use the big brush for this to start with anyway. I don't need to be too careful with that smaller brush, but dabbing again. That's nice, that's lovely and intense. A little bit of blending there when we go from the red to the green. Now, this is where I've got area of highlight, so I want to try and not obliterate that like I did before. dabbing again. The highlight's actually like that, kind of too, well, it's longer than that actually. It goes on further, so let's see if I can just pull a bit more out here. That's worked a bit better, I think. Now, it's very dark inside that where the stalk is, and I haven't managed to achieve that yet. So I'm going to see what happens with this, putting a smaller brush in. So I obviously need to make that darker. We'll come back to that when it's dried. So that's looking quite nice now, that apple, I think. But yeah, definitely needs to be darker inside there. And there's a tiny bit of shadow being cast, so once it's dry I'll put that on as well, and then maybe just a final layer of detail, which I may or may not then add water to, we'll see. Let's wait for these two to dry. We can always get the hairdryer on them. I might go and do that, and then we'll come back and we'll do a bit more on the leaf. Okay, so I have taken my hairdryer to both of these drawings. They are both dry now. Just want to make sure that you can see that leaf, because that's what I'm going to be working on next. So I did have a little play with getting my fine paintbrush, making it wet and putting it to the tip of the pencil, and then making some marks. I mean, that's really rather lovely. And I've gone a little, I've done that around the edge here just to make it a bit darker, but I'm going to do that later, because what I think it needs first is a little bit more detail adding using the dry pencils first, because I've gone a little bit wishy-washy in here now, I think, and I want to bring back a little bit more of a sense of this leaf kind of crinkling. I feel like I might be losing that a bit. So having said that, I'm going to start down here on these lovely, really rich orangey reds. So going in with dry pencil on dry paper again. Actually, let's go back to the orange. See if that's not going to make too much difference. So I just want a slightly more orangey red. That's not it. Make sure you can see this okay. So what I can see on the leaf surface is areas of orange, yellow, but also areas of slight areas of highlight and shadow. Or not so much shadow, but just darker, light and dark, let's say, which gives a sense of it starting to look like it's a bit crinkly. Sorry, I just hit the camera there with my head, with my glasses. So subtle, step by step. It's quite a slow process for me. But I'm trying to look carefully. And also what I want to try and achieve is a different finish to if I'd have just used coloured pencils and not watercolour pencils. So that's why I'm still trying to achieve this balance between detail and intensity of colour, but still lightness of touch. Otherwise it might just end up looking like I've not used watercolour at all. and that would be a shame. Okay, that's lifted that section a bit, I think. Very subtly, but let's go with a bit of darker brown around here. So that's my next layer of colour. I did a little bit extra here and here just off camera because I just saw them and put them in. So what I'm going to do now is with my fine paintbrush, again, less water on the tip this time. I'm just going to start to dab that colour. I'm not really sort of pulling it anywhere else at this stage. I'm just turning it from colour pencil to watercolour pencil. You know, I guess with making it, using watercolour pencils, you want it to have a little bit of a feel of it being painted, being watercoloury. So I think that's what I'm trying to do here, is still retain some of that pen work that I did, pencil work that I did using just the dry pencil. I don't want to obliterate that, but I just, adding the water just gives it a little bit of wateriness, doesn't it? Just a little bit of a watery feel. Not too much water though. I don't want it to dilute too much. I don't want it to look flat. I'm wetting my paintbrush and then just dabbing it off a little bit on my tissue. Okay, and now I'm going to work on this side very carefully because I've put darker colours here. I've got some grey and brown because I've got areas of quite dark shadow where this leaf crinkles. Coming together, I think. I might not do too much at the, now on this stage. Let it dry again. I don't want to lose. I don't want it to start overwork it and it also start look blended in. Okay, I am just going to put a little bit of this dark grey, but also take some of the excess off. Ever so carefully, just put some of that in there. whilst we've got that technique going, let's just put a few little markings on. I'll do that with the brown, not the grey. Dark brown, so just so I can make a few little, add a few little areas of interest, because there are some little blobs of decay on this leaf. Right, I'm going to stop the leaf there for now. I might just add a bit more definition to the stem later. And let's have a look at doing the apple. Okay, so for the apple, I was just having a look at it. I think what needs to happen is I need to do a little bit more work in this area here where we've got the depth of shadow, where, well, you probably can't see it, but it's quite dark in there. And also I haven't really worked on the stem itself, and it's just jumping out because it's white. So let's get rid of that to start with, but put a bit of detail in. I mean, not detail, but just a bit more kind of contrast between light and dark. So this brown is the one that I was just using and wetting the tip of, so it's still a bit wet. That's why it's coming out so dark, but that's okay. And we want, I think we'll put a bit of green down here. A bit more around here as well, I think. It's quite nice working on two drawings at once, because it's sort of, you can get a bit over involved sometimes, I think, and it just sort of refreshes your eyes. You've got something new to think about and concentrate on. And then back to this nice deep sort of red. It's a red, but it's a kind of on the bluey side of red. It's a bluey red, a cool red. These are actual markings on the apple, but they're also going to help us, help me suggest that this apple is three-dimensional, because the marks on the apple obviously are on the surface of the skin, and if I draw them, if I try and kind of follow the line as if I'm drawing across the surface of the apple, then that should help this apple to start to look like it's, well, 3D. Hopefully it already does look like it's 3D, but I am going to use the bigger paintbrush to begin with around the edge. I think I can still use that, but dab it again. Again, I'm using now, because I'm going around this edge, I am using the paintbrush almost flat. I think that's feels quite nice. It feels like it's still got that kind of lightness of touch to it. I might not do too much more to this apple. Try some lines. So I'm not putting any pigment on the brush, I'm just using what's on the page at this stage for this. Pulling it out from where it already is. Going in with a dry pencil on a wet surface now, just because, oops, sorry, I knocked the camera again. Just because I want to add a little bit of extra sharpness down here. And I think this needs to be a bit darker. Not too dark. There. And now I think I will let that dry. I just want to suggest a little bit of shadow around that, underneath that apple. So I'm just going to put the hairdryer on it again and then put a bit of shadow on, and then I think we might be done. So that's now dry and a little bit warm. So I'm going to be a little bit daring. I'm going to just bring a little bit of blue around the outside edge here, because, you know, I was talking about this red being a bluey red, and it is quite a bluey red. So I just want to put a bit of that around there, which I probably will wet, and then a tiny bit under here, which may suggest the shadow. We'll see. I hope I've not ruined it all now. We can always redeem it if we need to. Perhaps I've gone a bit too purple. Let's blob that away a bit. That's not too bad, I don't think. This is going to act as a bit of shadow, so it might need to be watered down quite a bit and pulled out. I know it looks like there's nothing there at the moment. I've actually going in with the grey now. The shadow isn't actually very big. I probably went a bit too big with it there. It's just more like that, really. So I think I'm going to stop there with these two drawings. partly because I don't want to overwork them, but also I don't know if you can see, but this paper has started to buckle a bit, so I'm not sure it would take too many more layers of paper of water anyway, even though I said that it's hot press watercolor paper and it's supposed to take the water better. It is actually buckling, so I think we will end there with this one. So I hope you enjoyed that video, and thank you very much for watching. I hope it wasn't too long a watch, but please do have a go with your watercolour pencils. Enjoy using them. Just give yourself time to experiment with them and use them in a way that works for you and feels right for you and that you enjoy. And let me know how you get on, because I love to see what you're doing. So until next time, I'll say goodbye.